Okay, hi everybody. I have Regional Chief Teegee with me now. And so then Regional Chief Teegee has some time to make a comment about Prime Minister Mark Carney's address to Chiefs yesterday. If you had a chance to see that, then you would know that that RC Teegee had an opportunity to respond. And so then during the question and answer period, Regional Chief Terry Teegee challenged Carney on respecting title and rights under UNDRIP for the pipeline. And his response was to promise meetings with coastal leaders. And so then what follow-up actions from your region, RC Teegee, would you demand to turn words into enforceable partnerships? So he's going to answer that question.
Well, what I would say is a follow-up to the questions that I had to Prime Minister Carney is to exactly enact some of the comments that he made in terms of how development will occur in British Columbia. In his office, the Major Projects Office, and also the Prime Minister's office, what was identified as projects of national interest were approximately 15 in this country, 9 of which are in British Columbia. So I think it's very important to engage with the First Nations out in British Columbia. I certainly know that some of the projects are supported by First Nations and will be brought forward by First Nations. However, one of the issues that we're all talking about is this memorandum of understanding with Alberta and Premier Daniel Smith's desire to develop some sort of pipeline. It didn't identify the route of the pipeline in the MOU, but ultimately it will transect somewhere in British Columbia. So certainly we're very concerned about the development of a northern gateway type pipeline that was brought forward by Enbridge 20 years ago and ultimately failed in November of 2016. So I did talk to many of the chiefs, and I know many of the chiefs and leaders have commented on this MOU and are very concerned. But for the most part, talking to a lot of the leadership and the people that would be affected by a northern pipeline have said no, and certainly that sentiment hasn't changed since this began 20 years ago in the development of a potential pipeline. So moving ahead, there is a tanker moratorium.
Yes.
And that was resoundingly supported by all the chiefs across the country to support our coastal First Nations and many First Nations to
in that emergency resolution I saw as well.
Emergency resolution to keep the moratorium, which became law in 2019. So that was one of the trade-offs as the development of a Trans Mountain pipeline, which goes from the tar sands to Vancouver area.
Okay.
And as far as we're concerned, the trade-off was that there was not going to be a northern pipeline nor northern traffic in terms of tankers.
Okay, so then that trade-off will not be reconsidered. Like for instance, if the moratorium, I always have difficulty with that word. If that legislation were respected, would BC Chiefs, you think, consider a pipeline then, as long as there's no tankers, or it's completely off the table?
I think for a northern pipeline going through the North Coast, it's off the table. I think many First Nations, especially on the coast, are very concerned about a development like that. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a no. It's a hard no. And I think Daniel Smith needs to understand that.
Yeah. Have you had an opportunity to speak with Daniel Smith at all?
No, not on this matter. I've met her before, but certainly not on this issue.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know, the outcomes of such a, really, I think that that leadership should do more talking, and I hope you do get to speak to Premier Daniel Smith and see if there's any kind of, any kind of arrangement that might work to benefit, both, the interests of First Nations and their responsibilities as they see it, and also, what Canadians are looking for. So I guess we'll stay tuned for that.
I think, what Daniel Smith needs to understand is that in British Columbia, we have the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and also the federal legislation of the United Nations Declaration Act. So as far as we're concerned, free, prior, and informed consent on major projects is first and foremost on any project in British Columbia. So certainly she has to better understand that, and that is making consent decisions on major projects, and certainly equity, ownership, impact benefits are part and parcel to any project in British Columbia. However, that isn't a substitute for consent. So, that's one piece of a big puzzle, and certainly a big piece of the puzzle is making decisions. And that's really respecting our ability to make decisions. Free, prior, and informed consent is the enacting of self-determination and sovereignty.
So that's the minimum. That's where Danielle Smith needs to start, and and I think it's a good thing to make your position known, and hopefully they can get there.
It's a minimum standard, and as far as we're concerned, the United Nations Declaration Act, govern ourselves. It's a human right. It's a human right as far as we're concerned, to assert our sovereignty and self-determination.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Regional Chief Teegee, and yes, come back again another time.